Hello everybody, welcome back for week 2 of Fingerstyle Foundations. I'm glad to see you back again. I hope you did your homework this week, because everything we do today is going to be strongly built on what we've already started to do. Specifically, that is getting our thumb going in bass patterns. And you'll remember that I said about 50 times last week that the important job is for that thumb to always start on the root note of whatever chord you're playing. And we looked at some different thumb patterns where the root note is on different strings. Sometimes that root note is on the 6th string, sometimes the 5th, and in the case of the D chord, it's on the 4th. So we adjusted our thumb patterns accordingly. We're going to keep those thumb patterns going this week, and now we're going to add some work for our fingers. Mostly everything we do tonight is going to be the 1st and 2nd finger only, and I'm going to show you not only a pattern to work on, but I'm also going to try to explain how you can learn this pattern if it gives you a little bit of trouble. Remember that we want to try to get our thumb on autopilot so that our brain can focus on our fingers on our left hand while the thumb just keeps doing its job. And that's why I had you spend so much time working on just the thumb in all of the different chords. What we're going to do now is we're going to start with a simple pattern underneath the bass, and we're going to start with that 2 bass note pattern on the thumb that I showed you. So in the case of the G chord, we're alternating between the 6th and the 4th string, always starting on the root note and then going back and forth. Okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a finger in between each thumb note. It's going to sound like this. And just to get you oriented here, we're using only the 1st and 2nd finger, and they're playing on the 2nd and 3rd strings. You might remember last week I suggested that maybe a good starting place to rest your fingers is with your 3 fingers on the 3 smallest strings stacked on top of each other. If you were doing that, then your fingers are already right where they need to be to start on this G chord pattern that we're going to do first. Root note is on the 6th string. Alternate bass is on the 4th, and then in between each thumb note, we're going to add a finger. The first finger note we play is the 1st finger, and then after we play that alternate bass note, then we'll play the 2nd string with the 2nd finger. So your fingers are going to be doing this, back and forth, and there's a thumb note in between every one. Give you some repetitions on this in a minute when you've had a chance to try this. I want to remind you again, these lessons are not TV shows, and it won't help you if you don't have a guitar in your hand. So make sure you're doing this with me as we go along. Again, it's thumb, 1st finger, thumb, 2nd finger. Now there might be a couple of different ways to tackle this depending on what is most comfortable for you. You could get your thumb going and try adding just 1 note and see if you can keep that thumb going like this. We're playing this pattern back and forth. Try just doing it with that 1st finger. If that doesn't trip you up, then try adding the other finger on the alternate note. Maybe it's easier for you to get your fingers doing this. Maybe you need to do both for a while. This might be new to your fingers. If you've never used your fingers at all, just getting used to actually picking the strings is going to be a new experience for you. You might need to spend a little time smoothing this out and just getting the feel of it. Again, as I mentioned last week, when I play these strings, I have a little bit of nail hanging over the ends of my fingers. Not much, but a little bit. So when I attack the strings, we call it, with my fingers are actually resting or touching the strings first with the skin, the tip of my finger, and then as I play the note, I'm sweeping through that string. It's an upstroke with your finger, pulling your nail through that string, and then the degree to which, depending on how long your nails are, how hard you dig in, that's what affects the volume of your notes. And we'll talk more here in a minute about balancing out your thumb and your fingers. So if you're used to this, then tackle going to the alternate pattern. I encourage you to start out slow and focus on making it smooth, smoother than I'm doing while I'm trying to talk and play at the same time. And now in the tab that I've written out for you this week, just like last week, each line is something to practice over and over again, okay? And I've oriented these again by what the root note of the chord is. So the first line of the tab there is our G chord. And so you can practice this one about 400 times. Let's start it off at this speed. I'm going to give you a little rehearsal to play along with. Let's start it at this tempo and do a few repetitions. If you want to count out loud while you're doing this, the one beat is that one. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You notice that I'm only counting on the thumb beats. Those are still in 4/4 time. Those are your down beats. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The finger notes in between make these eighth notes, because there's twice as many, but it's still the same piece of the pie. If you've done math, you can see these as fractions. To count that eighth note out loud, typically the way people do that is they'll say the word "and" on an eighth note. So you would count it this way: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so the "and" beat is that eighth note in between note. The thumb is still 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to need to take some time with this, I'm sure, to get that smoothed out, but there's your goal, is to get that pattern down. Line 2 of this tab, I cover E and its sister chord, E minor, because remember from last week, they both have the same bass notes, same exact thumb pattern as the G chord, because our root note is on the 6th string. And when we do this one, our fingers are playing the same 2 strings, 2nd and 3rd string. So this is exactly the same pattern, same strings as the first line, only now it's our E chord. And similarly, the E minor chord, and now we're going to get to hear the difference. Because that finger that we're lifting is on the 3rd string, and now our fingers are playing that 3rd string, so you're going to get to hear the difference between the chords. Remember last week when we did just the thumb only, the chord didn't change, the bass notes don't change. Now the chord is changing and you can hear it. Okay, let's do a few repetitions of that at a slow tempo for you to practice with on the E and the E minor chord. If you still need to look at your right hand to do this, that's okay. And then lift that left index finger, make an E minor. Okay. And one question you might have is, how fast should I practice this? How fast do I need to be able to play that? You can go as fast as you want, but never go faster than you can play smoothly and accurately. So I recommend that while you're learning the pattern, start out slow and smooth, and then as you want, as you get comfortable, we can start speeding this up, and it tends to take on a different feel to it. fast as you'd like to go, until you're playing bluegrass all of a sudden. Okay? Now, the next line calls out the F and the F minor chord. You can do this on your own. I just want to point out that, again, we're still with a root note on the 6th string, so the bass notes don't change, but now we can hear that minor chord change because our fingers are playing the note that changes it. Okay, and now if you remember what we did last week, you'll know where we're going next. Let's go to the next page of the tab and look at what happens when we have our root note on the 5th string. Now our pattern went to this, the thumb alternating, starting on the 5th string. Root note is the C on the C chord. There's our downbeat. Now our pattern is 5th and 4th string. These are still our downbeats, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the case of the C chord, our fingers are staying right where they already were. For this pattern, there's other patterns, but for this pattern, we're using the 2nd and 3rd string. It's also going to be true then for the A and A minor chord. Root note is still on the 5th string, so the thumb pattern stays the same. It's just a different chord underneath. And exactly the same right hand pattern, same strings for the A minor chord. Okay, and then last but not least is we would also do the same thing on the B7. Just like last week, all we're doing is adding the fingers. Again, they're in between your thumb beats, but your thumb plays at the same speed. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And the D chord, remember our pattern changed here because now our root note is on the 4th string, okay? The bass pattern we had going here was the 4th and the 3rd string. That pushes our fingers down a string because the thumb is going to be playing the 3rd string now as a part of the bass pattern. So move your 1st and 2nd fingers down to the 1st and 2nd strings, and now they're going to be doing this. And add those notes in between the thumb. And the same thing exactly for the D minor chord. And now we can finally hear that minor. Now, the very last line on this sheet of tablature is a modified finger pattern. And I didn't tab this all the way out because once I explain it to you, you're going to see what I'm doing. And you can do it on all the rest of the chords except for the D because there aren't enough strings. Okay, but what we're going to do when you get comfortable with this, and you may not be here yet, so this is for example purposes only for now, homework for later, okay? Let's take that same bass pattern back to the G chord, and now instead of only playing these 2 strings, we're going to do it the same way, except that we're going to alternate between these 2 strings. We're going to leave the B string, the 2nd string, out. So instead of this, now it's going to sound like this. okay? It's just a slightly different sound and a slightly different pattern. What you're going to find, though, is that all of a sudden, instead of playing these two strings next to each other, now we're skipping a string. Your fingers are going to have to learn how to feel that and how to get there accurately and smoothly. You do have a choice here. Neither is right or wrong. This is more of a preference. You could stay here and play that first string with your ring finger instead of the second. For me, when that's the only thing I'm playing, I find it more comfortable to ask my middle finger to move down there and play that first string. Okay, but you could do a ring finger and make it more of a rule for yourself that the three fingers stay as much as possible on their own string. It's also a good idea as early as possible to start introducing your third finger, your ring finger, into picking a note. Most people, myself included, find that getting that finger going is a little more challenging than the first and second finger. These two tend to be stronger and more stable, and that ring finger, for some reason, presents some challenges, okay? So that last line is an alternate finger pattern that you could do to get a different sound. And then when you're really ready to walk the tightrope, switch back and forth. Every other time, have your middle finger play the second string like we did before, and then the next time, play the first string. That would sound like this. Oops, let me do it again. Okay, I didn't quite play that right. Let me try one more time. I'm overthinking this. So the thumb is playing the same exact notes, but your middle finger bounces back and forth. If you see what I'm doing here, what you can do is start to experiment and create your own patterns. Here's another idea. What I'm doing there is every time I'm playing the middle finger on that second string, I'm adding the ring finger on the first and playing those two together. So now my fingers are doing that one alone, these two together. Okay, little games like that you can do along the way, but start with the simple one that I gave you at the beginning and then add things to it. For those of you that are more interested in the Chet Atkins thumb style, you remember last week I gave you two different thumb patterns. The simple one that we're doing now alternates between two strings. The same thing could be done with your three-string pattern. Remember that, where your thumb played a different note on the third beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. We went to a different string. You could take that thumb pattern and add the finger exercises that we just started, and that would sound like this. It would sound like this. And if you took that to the C chord, and so on through all of the rest of the chords that we've covered. I'm going to take a break right here and see if there's any questions on what we've gone over. You have any questions? None yet. Okay. Think of some questions, because I'm here for you. While I'm waiting for those, I'll talk a little bit about balancing out the sound between your thumb and your fingers. If you're wearing a thumb pick to do this, you're going to find that the tendency is for the thumb to be a little bit louder, possibly a lot louder than your fingers, especially if you don't have nails groomed on your finger to pick up that extra volume. This is totally a touch-feel development process that you have to go through. You have to discover how to balance that out. If you're hearing your fingers are let's see if I can demonstrate this. If the thumb is too loud and I'm not hearing the fingers, need to stop, dig in and get a little more of a bite with those fingers, okay? And try to smooth it out. We also talked last week about how the angle of your thumb and how far into the string you push before you pick the string has a lot to do with how loud that is. So you might also need to roll your thumb down just a little bit, not enough to be uncomfortable, but actually try to relax it a little bit and smooth out that attack, and then learn to increase the attack on your fingers if that's the way that they're out of balance. Okay? It's very common that it takes a while to get that feel, and until we talk about palm muting, which is coming up, you're hearing a lot of sustain, and when you hear that much sustain, it seems to exaggerate differences in the attack between your thumb and your fingers. We'll get that under control eventually with palm muting. But this is a good time to work on slow, smooth, even sound, and play different chords to try to keep it interesting so that you keep going. And then remember what else we talked about last week. Tap your foot on those downbeats to keep your rhythm smooth and steady. Okay? How about now, since we opened the floor for questions? You got some?
Here from Kathy's guitar. Does Jim always use his middle finger when he alternates between strings 1 and 2, and she clarified, instead of using your ring finger?
Yeah, I would say that because these fingers tend to be stronger, what I was just talking about was trying to play everything evenly and smoothly. That means that it's easier for me to keep these two more even with the thumb. Again, my ring finger, which also the nail is a little bit short today, so I'm mostly hitting skin there. So you'll notice I don't get the pop on that I do with my middle finger. So really the answer is I'll do both, and it has a lot to do with the song I'm playing, how fast I'm playing, and how loud it needs to be. We aren't doing melody notes yet per se, but if that note right there on that string happened to be a melody note, and it's really important for melody notes to not get lost or not be heard, I would especially use my middle finger then to make it loud and even with everything else. But as an exercise, especially while you're learning this now, I'd recommend you do both. Use that second finger and move it around, and learn to alternate and use that third finger. If you don't need it now, eventually you will want it, and the sooner you start developing it, the better it'll be down the road.
Okay, we got one from Dave White. Are your fingers hitting the strings at a 90 or 45 degree angle?
Let's see. I'm going to guess that by that angle, I think of a couple different angles when I think of angles on the fingers. The angle that I'm sweeping through the strings tends to be back at a little bit of an angle this way in relation to, this. If this was perpendicular or straight up and down, mine are back at a little bit of an angle, and the reason for that is I tend to play with my hand in what some people call a claw. Okay, my fingers are curved, and so when I stick them into the strings, in order to pick a string, I'm pulling through it and kind of underneath it, so my fingers are curling up usually as I play. Okay, you'll see a lot of other guitar players, especially classical guitar players, but a lot of fingerstyle players do this too. Their fingers will be relatively straight and kind of sweeping in this way, and then maybe they're oriented more vertically, pulling through the strings. If, though, your question was about the angle this way, up and down on the fingers, that's going to be a little harder for me to answer. I did talk about how your thumb pick angle, if you roll it down, you're kind of brushing across the top of the string as opposed to holding it straight and digging in, right? So that's an angle difference with the thumb. With my fingers, though, I would guess that at the point in time that they're resting on the string and ready to touch, they're pretty much straight up and down. And then I pull up and away, right? Because I only want to hit one string at a time. If I pulled it perfectly straight up, I'd start running into other strings. So I'm kind of pulling, lifting, trying to hit one string at a time. Okay, so I don't really think about an angle there so much as I think about how hard am I digging in, or am I just lightly touching them. Does that help, or did your angle question, do you have something else in mind there?
We can wait for his response. We have another one here from Greg GP.
Okay.
Played fast enough. Are these bluegrass patterns?
Sure. They what I think of these as basically is it's a foundation for where we're going next, which is going to be to actually play melody notes. So really for now, what this is an exercise to get your thumb and your fingers doing different things. But that pattern in it could be used as kind of an accompaniment pattern to several different kinds of music. And I guess if you it could work for bluegrass or country. To me, this with no muting at all and just played open like we've been doing, that to me sounds like folk music, right? But it's not really genre specific yet until we start to put, so we're going to learn some more things in coming weeks that are going to let us change the voice of what we're playing. And then you can change that voice and that feel and the tempo to bluegrass or anything else. So yeah, I would say it's we'll get there.
Okay, Dave said that about the angle of picking. He said thanks. That is helpful.
Okay.
We have one more here from Gills Foley. What about anchoring the pinky while doing this?
Okay, I noticed while watching myself on the camera down here on the replay that when we were doing this, I was anchoring my pinky. And last week when that question came up, I said I do it sometimes when it works and I don't do it other times when it's a hindrance. And I noticed that apparently my right hand decided that right now it was helpful. When I'm trying to play something really slow like this so that you can see it and so that I'm not shaking on the camera and all that good stuff, yeah, this gives me a little bit of stability that I like. You don't have to do that. And you may want to try it both ways. Without the pinky anchor, it still works. It's up to you, really, whatever feels the most stable. Where the pinky anchor doesn't work so good for me is when I'm using the ring finger, because those two adjacent fingers, if one of them's tied up, the other one feels funny and doesn't work so good. So if I were doing a three-fingered pattern, I wouldn't want that anchor there, because doing that really makes this hard to do. Okay, so pinky off the guitar, I can do that third finger better. But when I'm trying to get this finger, for example, to move nice and steady and slow back, and that pinky anchor seems to help. It's not required. It's up to you. Okay?
Okay, we've got one more question here. From Blank Henry, what is the main style you're going to be teaching?
Well, the main style here is fingerstyle. And remember that the title of this course is Fingerstyle Foundations. So we're not going to limit ourselves to any one particular type of fingerstyle. I'm trying to give you 10 weeks of what builds the biggest majority of different finger styles. Okay? We're not going to get genre specific here. We're not going to dive off into, Andy McKee playing and start beating on the guitar or anything like that. This is the basic foundations for fingerstyle. And so we are going to talk about learning how to play songs, no songs in particular, just an approach to learning how to play songs. And then we are going to tackle a song at the end, just one, mostly as a learning tool. Again, it's not just one fingerstyle we're doing here. And that's all for now. Keep those questions coming. What I've covered so far is really all I want you to tackle in one bite for this week. So unless you have questions, more questions, that's all the new material here, but I'll talk for a few minutes more about how I'd like to see you practice this week. And someone asked me separately in an email, how long do I have to practice each one of these parts? And I cannot say, because everyone's different. What I want your goal to be is, as I've said, get this played smooth and steady and slow, and only speed up as it feels good and sounds right, and at a steady tempo. And if you're not sure whether you're making any improvement or not, try this idea. I'll admit that doing this for very long gets pretty monotonous, okay? We're not at the music part yet. We're at the foundations and the drills. So what you could do with drills like this is say whatever else you're working on the guitar, maybe nothing else, but whatever else you're working on, set aside 10 minutes every day and just do the parts that we're covering each week. So in this case, set a little egg timer if you have to, and work on different chords, work on that pattern, and roll through them. And if you just did 10 minutes of this every day until next week, I think you'd be amazed at how much better it's going to sound in one short week. But these are foundational techniques that you really want to have down as nicely as possible. And again, as I mentioned last week, one way people talk about this or think about this is what we're trying to do is practice something enough that it's wired into what some people call the muscle memory. In other words, we're not engaged up here, the thumb in particular, but hopefully eventually the whole right hand is doing what we want without having to focus on every minute detail and struggle through it. We want it to be automatic and smooth. That takes nothing but lots of repetitions. Okay, so that's what we're after here. Practice, but again, a little bit each day is what you want to do. If you put your guitar away all week and then next Sunday oh man, tomorrow's the next lesson and I haven't done anything, so I got to get caught up. You could work an hour next Sunday night on this, and that won't have the value that it would have if you do 10 minutes every day. It's the same thing as when you're in school, right? If you save all your homework, all your studying for the test for the night before, you won't do as well as you will if you keep up and make a regular exercise out of this. Another question?
Okay, not a specific question, but the Rocker family asked if you can review the D chord again.
Yes, absolutely. I'll show you the thumb first, both versions of the thumb pattern, and then we'll add the fingers. Remembering that the D chord is special because its root note is on the 4th string, so our 2 bass note pattern is the 4th and the 3rd string. Okay? The 3 note bass pattern is 4, 3, 5, 3. So whichever one of those you're doing, regardless, your fingers are going to be alternating back and forth between the 1st and 2nd string, although in the other order. 2nd string, then the 1st string. Let's do that 3-string bass again. And since you asked for that, again, I'm going to do that again, but slower. Seems like I might have been going just a little bit fast there. I'm playing it so slow that my brain is getting in the way. This needs to be autopilot like this. And by the way, just as a tip, when I'm playing it like this, I'm not actually thinking about now. I'm hearing the sound of it without work because the thumb's got this job. But when I'm playing slow and trying to think how I would be thinking if I were you, my brain gets confused. Did you see what you needed to on that D chord? Probably the question was, what do I do with my fingers? Because all the other chords, the fingers were here. On the D chord, again, that first finger has got to get out of the way so that the thumb can play the third string. So move everything down one.
Rocker Family said yes, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, we do have a few questions, and then maybe could spend some time just working through that slowly, just playing through the whole.
Yep, we can do that.
Practicing slowly. Okay, we have one here from Eldon from Tennessee. I don't have an index finger. Can I use my pinky as a third finger?
Boy, that's a good one. Yeah, I don't know why not. I'll tell you that for me that would be a real challenge because my pinky. Remember, I said that my ring finger is kind of stubborn and is the weakest of the fingers that I pick with. That's even more so true of my pinky, more than the ring finger. It's really weak and unstable, but it's because I never use it. So I personally am of the belief and the opinion that whatever you use over and over again, you can get good at, and I don't know why you couldn't do that. Phil Keggy is missing part of, I believe it's his middle finger. I think it's gone, somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's gone at the middle knuckle on his picking hand, and it ain't holding him back any. So you can develop and get, you'd have to build up the strength and the steadiness and get your nail the way you want it on there. There's nothing physically about the pinky that says that you can't or shouldn't do that. Okay, it's just it would be rare for most players, but yeah, absolutely. If I were you, that's absolutely what I would be working on, is developing that. And probably for most beginning fingerstyle guitar players, all of the fingers are going to be a challenge at first. So you're teaching them all right now anyway, so you should be fine.
Here's another one. While picking with my finger, should I pick with nail or other parts?
Okay, if you have nails, and not everybody does, by the way. I mentioned last week that some fingerstyle guitar players rely on a really well built up callus on the tips of their fingers to give them enough of an attack that it works. Most fingerstyle players, though, do have a little bit of a nail on hanging out just a little bit over the tips. Doesn't need to be much. But again, my attack on the strings is to actually make contact with the string first with the skin and then pull through with the nail. So it's actually both. You're using the skin and the nail to play the way I do. Okay? Again, this is something where there's really not a right or wrong answer here. It's really driven more by what you're comfortable with and ultimately by what sound you want. I mentioned that I keep my nails pretty short, but long enough that they can make contact with the strings. You will see some guitar players that have what seem to me like extraordinarily long fingernails, and it looks as if they're almost playing exclusively with their nails. The trick there is that then you run the risk of getting a scratchy sound. Making contact with that with your skin first and then picking it has the subtle little detail of muting that string right before you play it. So there's no, you're not. You see how there's a defined. There's just a little bit of a mute right in front of playing the note, and I think that affects the tone. again, it's not a right or wrong answer. It's a style and sound and voice, and most of all, what you're comfortable with. I think most classical instructors teach that way too, that you touch with the skin first and then pull through with the nails.
Okay, we've got a couple more. Gary NY42. At this point, should we be able to change chords without missing a beat?
I don't want to tell you you should be able to by now, but certainly consider that another valuable part of the way we're doing these drills. Once you work through, remember on my tab, I have pretty much one chord per line or one pattern per line based on where the root note is. But I certainly encourage you to change these up, and here's how you could do that. With all of these chords, you should be able to play the major chords in every key. So for example, if you started with C, then your other related chords in this key, the 1, 4, 5, if you're familiar with that, this is the 1 chord, the 4 chord is F, the 5 chord is a G. So what you can do is take each key, key of C, key of G, key of A, key of D. You've got all the chords you need to play the 1, 4, 5 in each of those. And while you're working on your finger patterns and your thumb patterns, you can work on your chord changes. And we did talk a little bit last week about chord changes, but I'll just briefly mention what I talked about then. Let's say, for example, you're going from a G to a C. The root note is the first note you always need to hit, right? So when I'm coming out of this pattern, I'm on the G chord, and when I switch to the C chord, the very first thing that I need to hit when I get to the C chord is the C note. So I don't even have to move the whole chord at once. I just got to get here. Watch this transition. See that? I went to the C note first and then added the rest of the chord behind it. If you can get it all at once, that's great. But use these drills. If you're struggling with chord transitions, use these drills to practice those as well. Now where that'll get difficult is if you're switching between two chords that have different root notes, different root strings, I should say. So on this G chord, my root note is on the 6th string. When I go to that C chord, my thumb pattern changes because now my root note is on the 5th string. That's a great exercise to do, but expect that that's not going to come quickly at first until your thumb is really locked in on these patterns.
Okay, here's one from Rocker Family. If we are new to fingerstyle, should we focus on improving on the basic style or also learn the Chet Atkins style? Or will trying to practice both be confusing?
It's probably going to vary by student, and how much you can take on at one time. The old saying is, if you're going to eat an elephant, you got to do it one spoonful at a time. You don't want to swallow the whole elephant. And I don't know for your particular case how much more complicated, for example, the 2-string, that thumb pattern, compared to the 3-string thumb pattern, which is the Chet Atkins type pattern. If that seems complicated, you may have to back off and start with the simple one. For me, I would try to learn, if you want the Chet Atkins style, I would work on this bass pattern right off the bat. To make that one, by the way, a little bit easier to figure out, analyze it this way. Instead of just thinking about bouncing between 2 strings repetitively over and over again, listen to your downbeat and listen to that 3rd beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Because really you could simplify this or imagine this a different way. It's this. If you were strumming an alternating strumming pattern, this is what you would be doing, and that three-string chet pattern is replacing the strum with this note. Bass, strum note, bass, strum note. So really, it's this with a note in between. Okay? So it may not be complicated for you, and if it's not, I recommend starting on that right away. Okay? That's what I play the most of. Right? So this is kind of home for me. If I go to the two-string bass, it's a whole different feel, whole different sound to my ears. I think you had another one.
Yeah, we've got another one from Naughty Pirate. How can I learn to press softer with my fretting hand? I start off soft but get the gorilla grip.
That's a great question, and it's an especially great question when we're talking about bar chords. Here's the thing. Right now, you're probably very focused on your right hand, and it certainly is my tendency. I even felt it creeping up here a little earlier on myself as I'm really dialed into my right hand and I'm concentrating over here. And as I get to something that's hard to do, my left hand starts grabbing. I know exactly what you're talking about. Well, if you do that on a bar chord, it's going to kill you quick, right? The fact that you're aware of it and you recognize what's going on is the best thing you've got going on, because you can stop, take your hand off the fretboard, shake it out, and then put it back down and try to be gentle. You're kind of touching on a technique that I use to teach bar chords, which is that you want to play with your left hand with the minimum amount of pressure that it takes to have the note ring true and not buzz. And bar chords are usually where we find out quickly when we're pressing too hard, and just because it's an evil old bar chord doesn't mean you have to wear yourself out. And the exercise I teach for that is to play your bar, put your index finger like you're going to play a bar chord, any chord, and just touch the strings until they're dead. That tells you that you've got a nice even flat finger over there, okay? And then with your thumb right behind that bar, slowly start squeezing until you hear everything ring clear. Recognize how little pressure that's actually taking, and then back off and stop. Give your hand a rest and then do it again. What you're fishing for here is what's that minimum pressure that it takes. And then it turns out that it works for a bar chord without squeezing as hard as you possibly can. Well, in this case, any of your open chords, while your brain is over here working on the fingers, if you can remember to think that way, that same principle is true of any chord. It takes a minimum amount of pressure. If it's buzzing, then obviously you're not pushing hard enough. Add a little more. But if it's ringing clear and you're getting tired or the tips of your fingers are starting to hurt, take some time and experiment with that. Try to relax your left hand. That's really the biggest issue, is we get tensed up and then we squeeze too hard.
Okay, from Chris, my thumb seems flexible, double jointed. Is there an angle that it should remain?
Yeah, Chris, let me ask you a follow-up question. Are you playing with or without a thumb pick? Just out of curiosity. I'm going to guess you're playing without a thumb pick, if I'm envisioning what you're asking. I don't know if he can respond with a follow-up there.
Yeah, we can wait and see.
Yeah, but let me start answering that the direction I think you were going. Playing without a thumb pick means that you're tucking your thumb into the strings and then pushing down. And I actually find that, to me, this feels like more resistance, okay? And the reason is because these lower strings down here are wound strings. That's this scratchy texture we have on these strings. And so when you push down with a meaty part of your thumb down into a wound string, I find that creates a lot of resistance as opposed to a smooth plastic pick that slides off of it nice and easy. So you're just going to have to develop your thumb technique And what you may find yourself doing is learning to keep this joint, if not absolutely straight, possibly even bent forward a little bit. I'm not saying this is what you'll need to do. Your physiology may be different than mine, but when I try to play without a thumb pick, which isn't very often, I find that I'm wanting to get a little bit of a bend in my finger. Otherwise, yeah, I feel sort of sloppy. It doesn't feel like it's bending backwards to me, but it feels unstable and uneven. But I think, again, with some practice, you'll develop that touch. And you know what might also be at play here too that I don't have because of the thumb pick is maybe too that as you develop the callus from doing this a lot, that skin will get tougher on that edge of that thumb, and it'll probably slide off of there a little bit better. Okay, did he respond back with a reply?
I haven't seen any reply.
I hope I answered your question.
And that's all the questions we have at the moment.
All the questions. Okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to run through a few more minutes here of some patterns that you can practice along with me, and try to do it at a reasonable tempo for you. And we'll go back to the first page, first chord, and work on that G. And I don't know, we'll give it 8 or 10 or 12. Let's give it 12 bars. So it's almost like the blues. Ready? 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't count, but that was close to 12. We'll see. All right, let's get to, you can repeat the other ones with a 6-string bass, just like that. Let's do some chords with the 5th string root note. Let's tackle the 4th string bass note pattern. Remember, your fingers move down now. Playing the 1st and 2nd string. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Also, if you make a mistake, don't stop. Keep track of where that downbeat is. If you have to, count it out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I'll do some with the 3-string pattern. Okay, now we're going to do still the same finger pattern, but now we'll do each of those, root note on the 6th, 5th, and 4th, with our alternating 3-string bass pattern. Okay, 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, ready, go. going to go to a 5th string root note without stopping. Let's go to that C chord. 1, 2, ready, go. And now let's go to the 4th string bass note chord, the D chord. 1, 2, ready, go. Almost made it. So you can take some examples like that and work through all of your chords, practice your chord transitions without breaking your pattern, even to that tough D chord. And it's best, by the way, when you're trying to do this, if you're in a room by yourself, so that you're not tempted to try and talk while you're playing at the same time. That's really hard to do. All right, got more questions?
Yeah, we've got one more from Al Elms. Can you explain the 3-string pattern again?
Yeah, I can. And if you go back for tablature on this, you can refer back to week 1, where I show those patterns for every one of the open position chords. And so the thing that's true with all of these thumb patterns is we're always starting on the root note of a chord. And instead of doing this simple 2-string pattern for all 4 beats where we go 1, 2, 3, 4, we're playing the same 2 notes over and over again. The 3-string pattern chooses a different string and a different note for the 3rd beat in each measure. So this 1, 2, 3, 4 becomes this 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that off bass note, the one that's not the root note, it's the alternate bass note, is on the 3rd beat of the measure. So this is the pattern when our root note is on the 6th string. So it goes 6, 4, 5, 4. And that pattern works for all of our chords where the root note is on the 6th string. So G, F, E. 6, 4, 5, 4. Root note, 4, 5, 4. 1, downbeat, 2, 3, 4. The alternate note is on beat 3. Okay? So that's your pattern for 6th string root note. The pattern for 5th string root note, like a C chord, the A, and the B7, that pattern starts on the 5th string on the root note, goes to the 4th string, and then that alternate bass note, the one that happens on beat 3, is on the 6th string. And then we hit that 4th again. So the pattern is 5, 4, 6, 4. Also, same pattern works for A. Also works for our B7. Same thumb pattern, driven by what string the root note is on, the starting note. That pattern for the D chord, where our root note is on the 4th string, 4th string, 3rd, 5th string, 3rd. You'll notice this is the same pattern as we had on the 5th string roots notes. It's just everything has now moved down a string. So it's 4, 3, 5, 3. So again, remember, first beat, root note, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Did that clear that up on the 3-string bass note? It's still 4/4 time, like the 2-string bass notes pattern was. We're just involving an alternate bass.
Haven't had any response yet. We can.
Checking for questions again.
Yeah. If you guys have any more questions, get them up. And this one just popped up. Really struggling to make the A string not buzz, and the small E string to ring when making a G chord, and alternating the bass.
Okay.
Can we read that again, or you got?
Yeah, I think I got it, but go ahead and read it again.
Really struggling to make the A string not buzz and the small E string to ring when making a G chord and alternating the bass.
Sure. Okay, and that's not an uncommon problem, especially if by any chance you're playing a wider necked guitar, like a nylon classical string or some fingerstyle guitar, steel string guitars. People like to think they need wider necks for that. I don't. I have a fairly narrow neck on this guitar, but your problem is very common, and the reason is because if you're fretting it the way I am, you've got these two adjacent fingers, your third and your fourth finger, are playing opposite sides of the fretboard, so that's kind of a stretch there. And the tendency, there's two problems that you're apparently experiencing, is that this ring finger, since you're reaching from underneath the fretboard and trying to get to the top string, the 6th string, and then at the same time you're having to curl that pinky up at a 180-degree curve to get down here and hit that little string. That's quite a stretch. And so the tendency is this may not be fretted properly, that's your buzzing, and then this finger wants to lay down, right? Because we're stretching, we're trying to get up there as far as we can, and we're stretching. And do you see what I just did to exaggerate that point? That's going to be your solution, or the first thing to try. To demonstrate this finger laying down, watch what happened with my thumb. I brought it up here and grabbed the fretboard, grabbed the neck like a baseball bat. That really makes them lay down a lot. So the solution then is to go the opposite way. Take this thumb and put it farther down behind the fretboard. If you got a little thumb puppet going on, putting on a show up here, put that thumb farther down. And a classical guitar teacher would instruct you to put that thumb right in the middle, back middle of the fret, or the middle of the neck back here, not showing at all. That's the extreme example. But what I want you to see and feel, let's see if I can get a camera angle here that, which camera should I point at? I want to show them side, there we go, that's the one. Chris got it. No, it's not Chris, I'm sorry. So, by bringing that thumb down, watch what my wrist does. Okay, it drops my wrist. It opens up my hand here. It gets those fingers pointing straighter into the strings and into the fretboard. So that with this problem finger here, if my thumb is up, I'm laying down. If I bring that thumb down, that ring finger starts pointing straighter in there and hopefully stays off of that 5th string, okay? That won't necessarily help you with your pinky problem, but let's solve one at a time, okay? So put that thumb down however much you have to stop this, okay? Eventually you'll probably develop the strength in that finger to where you can have your thumb wherever you want, you know. Go ahead and do your puppet show, and you can eventually get there, but for solving the problem, bring that thumb down. Now, the pinky is probably weak right now. If you're just starting out and you're having this problem, this just needs some exercise, okay? And so for the time being, you're going to have to work on smoothing it out in 10-minute doses every day, right? Not a Sunday night cram. But another thing you can do is build this chord as an exercise. This is not how you would play, but while you're trying to get this chord under your belt, build this chord in two halves, okay? First, let's do this top part. Let's get that solved. Only check those top strings. When you've got that smoothed out, then keep that exactly where it is. Keep your thumb there, try to keep that clean, and then go down and try to add that pinky. And it's going to be stubborn. It's not going to want to do this. And then try playing it all and see if you've got it clean. After you've done a few repetitions of that, get that part clean, add the pinky, now go the other way. Start with the pinky, put it down first, and you're going to find out that this is going to help your pinky a lot. Since it's weak, if you put it in position first and then stretch into the rest of the chord, your pinky's not wobbling around trying to find home base here. It's already there. So you're building the chord, that part first, see if you can play that clean, and then with your thumb nice and low, now reach up and add those two. Okay, this is a hand exercise. This is not a technique for how you would play this during a song. But I think for a lot of students that have asked me that question, tackling a chord in parts like that, a little bit at a time, build one part of the chord, then lay the other down. You can do this with bar chords too, right? Play your bar, and then add your chord to the bar. Get that bar clean, then add the rest of the chord. Now go the other way. Forget that. Don't worry about the bar. Get that down and clean, and now add the bar behind it. Okay? We're teaching our hand to get comfortable and strong in these different shapes, and they all are. They're different shapes, they're different configurations, and they take different muscles that you probably don't use for much else. Okay?
Okay, we've got a few more here before we wrap up. Pipkins. I've been fingerstyle picking for a while without thumb pick. Will I regret this later on?
Well, you are the only one who can answer that, and I'll guide you to that answer this way. You have to decide for yourself who's the guitar player you most like to listen to and most want to emulate. That doesn't mean that your goal in life is to emulate somebody else, but while you're learning, emulation is one of the most valuable learning tools you can have. You're going to need somebody that you're going to listen to a lot, and they have a sound that you like. And to my ears, this... that is a different feel. It's not wrong. It's a different feel than this. And that's the sound that I prefer, and you can only get that with a thumb pick. So you have to tell me what your favorite guitar player does, and then I'll tell you, do what they're doing, with or without a thumb pick. Lots of players of both kinds. If you like Mark Knopfler and Dire Straits, he does fingerstyle on an electric guitar with no thumb pick, and the guy's a millionaire, so you can't say it's wrong. I just prefer for myself, the Atkins, Travis, punchy thumb pick sound on a lot of what I play. Not all of it, but so to me, that's the way to achieve the sound that I want. It's not really so much a matter of which is the right or wrong technique. Okay, will you regret it later on? Yeah, if you're playing with your thumb forever and you're trying to play a Merle Travis song, you're not ever going to sound like Merle Travis. So if you would regret that, you better get a thumb pick.
All right, here's one from Greg GP. How come you're not alternate picking with a thumb pick?
I'm not alternate picking with a thumb pick. You must be citing a particular example. So when I was teaching this particular pattern, I wasn't doing what I would call an alternate picking, but when I'm teaching this pattern, now I'm alternating the bass. So in some of these examples I am, and some I'm not. And if you're asking me why I did that, it's because they're two reasons. One is they're different styles. Depending on what style someone might be after, they're going to want to be able to do either one or both. But also the alternating bass pattern, for somebody that's brand new, it might be just a little bit too much variety all at once while we're adding fingers and chords and everything else. I recommend you learn both, alternate bass and a straight two string pattern. Trying to start you off with both or with a choice.
Okay. Got one more here from Steve Money. How would you play the B7 with the 3 alternating bass?
Yeah, okay. So the beautiful thing about those 3-string alternating bass patterns is what all you need to pay attention to figure that out is what's the root note on. What string is the root note on? And in the case of the B7, it's on the 5th string. So it's the same as all of our other chords where the root note is on the 5th string. So it works for C, works for A and A minor, and the B7 is the same exact thumb pattern, but like the C chord, to get that 6th string bass note, I need to move this finger. I don't want an open one there. F doesn't work in a B7 chord, so I need an E rather. I need that F sharp. This is my alternating bass right here. And then it's the same pattern. 5, 4, 6, 4. 5, 4, 6, 4. There it is. So that's why I wrote the tab out the way I did with certain chords on the same line, is because they have the same root note on the same string. Okay, that tells you that your thumb pattern is the same for everything on that line. Okay.
Okay, we've got one last quick one here. Could you mention the brand of thumb pick you use again?
Yeah, it's Fred Kelly, and they do have a website, but what I actually recommend you do if you're interested in those is you go to an online guitar store called Elderly Music, and their website is called elderly.com, ELDERLY.com. And the reason I recommend that is if you buy these picks straight from Fred Kelly, you got to buy a whole batch of them. I think it's either a dozen or 2 dozen at a time. I use and do buy them in that kind of quantity because I give them out. I have them all over the place. I even have them in my truck just in case, because I have a guitar in my truck and you never know. But if you go to elderly.com, they have the most amazing assortment, not just of Fred Kelly, but all kinds of thumb picks out there, and you can spend hours looking at them all. But the nice thing is that you can buy individual Fred Kelly thumb picks, and they're very reasonably priced. They're like $1 or $1.25 a piece. They're not bad at all. So that's where I would go shopping. And I don't get compensated for that public service announcement. Anything else? Okay, we're done with questions. Your homework for this week, obviously, is to take these now thumb and finger patterns and work through, even if you don't play every one of your chords down here in first position, try to spend a good amount of time with your root note on each of the 3 strings, right? Root note on the 6th string, 5th string, and 4th string. Whatever chords you're playing, you want that thumb pattern going, and then add fingers in between the thumb beats with those chords. And 10 minutes a day, minimum. More is better. Skipping a day is not so good. All right? Next week, we're going to talk about rather than playing just patterns, we're going to have the thumb stay in a pattern, and we're going to start working on playing individual notes with your fingers that make a melody line. So we're going to give the fingers a break from patterns and play a specific melody line. Or I'm going to actually teach you how to do that. All right? And I'll give you some exercises for learning how to do exactly that. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week. Same time, same channel.